and spray painted the whole room. But welcome back and thank you for joining on the Facts of Life podcast hosted by me, John Doan, where every single episode, the acronym LIFE could mean something different. The L in Life today is going to be about lessons. Recently, we had a release of our very first episode number 1. It was about me, John Doan. Talked about my childhood, my culture, my upbringing, and, some of it was about my teenage years. And after the release party, I got a couple different requests where people wanted to know more about my upbringing, more about specifically, how I was as a teenager, because I mentioned several times that I was kind of bad. And people wanted to know more about that. And if you, didn't follow along or haven't watched any of my other episodes, I talked about how growing up in my teenage years, my parents were out working a lot of the hours. They had come here from Vietnam and didn't know our American culture, so all they knew how to do was work. So I was pretty angry as a teenager and did a lot of different things. Some I won't talk about today or ever, on any of my episodes. However, I can generalize exactly, what I went through. I think part of it was just being a teenager, the chemical imbalance in my brain as I was growing up in my 15, 16-year-old to maybe, it probably lasted like 15 to 18 years old. Probably lasted about when I was starting around 14, 15, all the way through, the age of 17. So going back, starting from beginning of I say high school, what was I doing? I was a break dancer. I was going out and I was always out of the house. My parents were never home, so my house was the party house. I mean, from 3 o'clock until they came home at 8, we literally would have, anywhere from 10 to 20 people over at the house. Music's cranking. We would clear our living room, move all the furniture, and everybody would dance. And we would cut hair, and do fades in the garage and smoke cigarettes. I mean, you name it, we were pretty bad. And I guess that's what happens when there's no parent or adult supervision and there's a bunch of teenagers in the house. I went through a phase where I was really angry. I'm not like who I am today. And I was always angry. I think part of it was the fact that there was a disconnect with my parents who didn't know our culture. I was growing up, with friends and everybody else who was adapted. So was I, but none of our parents were. So I think that created a big gap, behavior or understanding or communication. And so I was always angry. A lot of arguments was happening, a lot of discipline from my parents, but it was not very effective because it just wasn't. And so, the more they were upset, the more they were coming home tired, and the more they were upset and yelling at me, the more, I guess, I rebelled. That combination with, let's say, the 90s, where rap, gangster rap was on the come up, baggy pants, baggy jeans, that rebellious, attitude. Yeah, I was out, I, for the most of it, got into a lot of fights. Again, always angry. So I had a short fuse. Anytime something came up, I was always ready to go. As a teenager, always very protective over my friends. I tried a lot of different things that were not good. And in the end, what it did was it taught me a lot. I guess sometimes people go through things and they don't learn what they went through. So, it's that saying, been there, done that, and still doing it. Not me. I learned a lot of lessons out of it. I learned lessons of what not to do. I've learned lessons of how to do things better or how to do things right. Even growing up and getting to know my parents, I think that taught me a really big lesson of what my parents had to go through. And therefore, all these lessons that I've learned, the things that I've gone through, whether getting in trouble or the things that I've done, has really got me to a point where I've really been able to learn what not to do, very important, and how to do things right. So lessons are very important, but I am who I am today because of all the lessons I've learned and all the things that I've done. Okay, I'll tell you about one story since I'm trying to not talk about a lot of those things. But in eighth grade, I had a situation where I was very angry. My eighth grade band teacher, who was very strict, I always got into arguments with him. I won't name him, but I always got into arguments. One day, I just had enough of it. It was like end of eighth grade, I want to say. And I was just so angry, right? As a 13-year-old, we got into a huge argument. In band, there was like these rooms that, you can go practice in. They were soundproof or whatnot. And he stuck me in one for almost the whole class. And I was just fuming. Later on that evening, got a can of spray paint and came and spray painted the whole room. And yes, I did get caught. The police came the very next school day and brought me out and put me in a police car. Nothing happened out of it. I got a big warning. I had to go clean the mess up and pay for all the damage. However, that's kind of the start of my teenage years, to give you a little bit of color or flavor of the kind of trouble that I got into at a young age. And I don't know, maybe I'll leak some other things here and there. However, that's a little bit of what I'll talk about today. So that is my L in life today. It's the lessons that I've learned. Next, the I in life that we're going to be talking about today is inspiration. What inspires me? Why do I inspire others? Well, that's a good question. I think my inspiration comes a lot from my culture. I'm Vietnamese-American, and in our culture growing up, if you didn't know, most of the Vietnamese first gen folks that came over, such as my parents, uncles, family, or whatnot, came here from Vietnam after the war in 1975. And again, there was a cultural difference. And one thing that I learned a lot was watching my parents work a lot. And I'm talking about waking up at 5, running their own business, coming home at 8. Even after that, they brought work home. My sisters and I were responsible for doing a lot of the work, to help out. We hated it. However, it definitely ingrained hard work ethics, right? And just pushing the envelope. So my inspiration, I would say, is my parents, and watching them work the way that they did to provide. I didn't really understand that as a teenager or as a kid. However, once I got older, married, had my own kids, and had to really push the grind, I think that that's what really made it important for me to really be motivated, driven, and all through inspiration of my parents. What also inspires me too is kind of touching on the first part of my lessons that I learned. A lot of people, with the amount of trouble that I got into, even my uncles and aunts told me, we really thought, John, that you were going to end up in prison or dead because of the amount of trouble that you got into when you were younger. Those types of words that have stuck with me all these years, I think that the shame my parents felt for their family telling them things like this, and it really inspired me to prove everyone wrong, right? It's like, okay, yep, I may have been bad and I didn't, go through proper channels of graduating college because I opened up a business instead, and I decided to kind of go against like all the different things that, our culture wanted our kids to do. I didn't do any of it. And so that inspires me to prove everyone wrong, which, I wouldn't say that I'm there yet. However, I do think that I'm a long way towards, proving everyone wrong. I've heard it. I've heard family tell me like, man, I can't believe you are where you are, because it's completely different from what we thought. However, right now, with this inspiration, it's really, really driven me. So I think a lot of times people are motivated or driven for different reasons, right? Maybe your upbringing, you didn't have money, you didn't have food to eat, your parents couldn't do certain things for you, and that drives you. And that motivates you. I would say that that was partially a part of my upbringing too, just not having or not being able to do. And a lot of that was based on my parents not knowing what to do. And I'm motivated in my own way to show my kids a different life, whether it's my wife or my kids. I want them to have a different life than the one that I had. So I make sure that they get what they need and that they see and experience and do and what I didn't get to do. That's also inspiration to me. It drives me to do the things that I do today as far as business goes, and the feeling of pushing and driving even harder to make sure that my goals are met. Next, the F today in life is about the future. I think that talking about the future is very important. I think it's all related with the lessons that I've talked about, the inspiration that I've talked about, because it all equals what happens in the future. Now, goal setting is important, but you got to keep it very real. If you set up unrealistic goals, that's not really a good way to go. And maybe they should be done in phases, right? Like, hey, from here to here, you're going to hit this. They're going to be incremental goals that you can hit, because in order to hit the end result or your main goal that you want to hit, you're going to have success. But if you keep on failing, you're going to give up. You don't want to do that. We want to set up incremental goals so that we can make sure that we get what we want in the long run. So they don't have to be big chunks of goals. They could be small little goals to hit. They could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. That's how we should think to ourselves when trying to inspire or drive ourselves to hit goals in order to build the future that we want. Growing up the way that I did definitely set me up for my future because of what I've seen, the work ethics that have been ingrained in me. But there's a lot more to it. In order to build the future that you want, you've got to teach yourself. You've got to learn. I think that's really important. I'm not talking about academically, but I'm talking about really learning, whatever it is. I'm in the trade of real estate and lending. And for me, I think I go above and beyond as far as trying to learn what the newest techniques are, strategies, being smart about guidelines and how, programs work, so that if I know exactly how the mechanics of a loan program would work, for example, then I can fit more people into the program, therefore being able to do more loans and then also feeding to my future goals, which is building more wealth. However, if you stay really basic, how do you build? How do you hit or set those goals? There's a saying, if you're not growing, you are behind. What does that mean? Because if you're not growing and you're just staying right here, everybody's surpassing you. So everybody else is growing and the world is growing and you're just staying status quo. That means you're falling behind. So you got to keep on moving, got to keep on growing, got to keep on learning, research, read, watch videos, listen to other people. And when people give you advice, it's really important that you listen. It's up to you if you want to actually take that advice and go with it. That's not important, right? You should listen to everything that everybody gives you as far as advice goes, and then you can decipher if you want to use that or if it's relevant to you or not. But those that don't want to take in advice or are reluctant to listen to people because of ego, yeah, those are the ones that will not have a bright future. If I could make one recommendation today, please listen to any advice or consultation that, people who have more experience than you do, or more success or more wealth than you do, listen to what they have to say and take bits and pieces of that and use it so that you can to build your future. E in life is for energy. I think this is a big one. And I sped through the last 3 a little bit so that I can have a little bit more time to talk about this. I'm not ever going to talk about, religion or politics on my show. However, I do believe from a scientific point of view that our world, universe, we, people, yeah, it's all about energy, right? I think that's a proven fact, no matter how you want to look at that. I also believe that your energy, or what people call it today, your vibe, right? Vibe short for vibration. Vibration is all based on energy, right? So if your energy or vibe is a certain way, that's what I think you're going to attract. You might refer back to that video they came out with a long time ago called The Secret. It was about law of attraction. If you look at that, I think that a lot of that has to come back to your vibes, your energy, your outlook, right? And one of the things that I would say, not including my teenage years, right? I'm talking about as an adult. One of the things that I've really been able to sustain is a really positive outlook, positive energy. You can tell, like, if you watch me, this is how I sound on a daily basis. Yes, I'm loud, and yes, I talk fast, I speak fast, but my energy is naturally at a very high level. And I rarely get angry. I don't believe in getting upset and holding grudges. There's no one out there today. I don't care who it is or what they've done to me. I don't wish any bad energy on anybody out there today, whether you screwed me over or you ripped me off or whatever. It's in the past. I don't remember it. I don't want to. I choose not to. Because I tell a lot of people this, most of my kids growing up, when you are angry at somebody or you hold grudges, the only person that even cares or that it affects is you. You're the one holding that grudge. It creates bad energy. Because when you're angry at somebody, you expect that that person realizes or knows or reacts or does something to get rid of your anger. And if it never does, that anger just subsides in your body or your mind or your heart. What good does that do? Get rid of that. Like, let it go so that you can move on to a better and or different or just a new chapter in your life. That's my belief. And, I also think that once you let grudges go and you stay positive, all you do is attract more positive, because that's how, energy works or electricity works, right? If you have a positive vibe or positive energy, I'm telling you, it goes a long way. It's like that saying, be a positive Patsy, not a negative Nelly. And, the reason why is because if you're positive, you attract a lot of positivity. I believe that has been a lot of my success, right? Because of my positive attitude, people like to work with me. And they think that I also will have a positive output when I'm transacting on different things, whether it's, negotiating with people, speaking with people, asking people for help, right? If I'm doing it in a positive way, I will probably get more of what I want than if I was being negative. If you're negative and you're asking for help, it's like, do people really want to help somebody who's being negative? Like, it won't sound grateful. It will sound like you're blaming people or you're pointing your finger instead of asking for help. Maybe it's blame that it is, being at fault and asking for help to get through something. I think it's really important to be positive when you're training people or developing people. How do you do it if you're negative? In my perspective, having that positive energy, having good vibes only attracts that. And by outputting that positive energy, you will gain a lot more positive things in your life that will come your way, whether it's with marriage or communicating or having a good relationship with your kids, or growing your business, or finding success, or talking to customers, or developing relationships with your team members, being able to have really good communication with your vendors. You name it, it's going to go a long way. And so if you are somebody out there who knows you are negative a lot, you're always, pessimistic, skeptical, always being negative, that's what you're going to attract. And you're going to close that door or chance of opportunity more than you probably think today. If you would just flip the script and be a lot more positive, whether that means that you need to really rethink about your behavior or the way you communicate or fixing the way that you act or behave, test it. I guarantee you, your life will change. And if you do, better and bigger things will happen naturally, whether you know it or not. That's the other thing about being positive, right? When you're being positive, it's more of like a change in behavior, characteristic, or personality. If you are trying to be positive and you are expecting results or expecting change, it's just not going to work. It doesn't work like that. You need to change your behavior and personality and your vibes naturally, and don't expect anything to change. Then they will. Okay. So that's all I've got today. Thank you very much for joining me on our podcast, The Facts of Life, hosted by me, John Doan. If you like what you heard, please subscribe or like, and we'll see you next time on episode number 10. Thank you.